Okay, we are live. So this is our final discussion about the ways that organizations can prepare leaders to respond to crisis. Does anyone want to go first?
I guess I can. In the textbook, it talks about the anatomy of a crisis, different types of crises that companies and organizations can take, such as and also how people view these crises. That was interesting to read. Public perception, like natural disasters, and how the public perceives that. Products and services, like way back in the day when I think it was Tylenol had someone did something awful to Tylenol and somebody died. It's a very old story. I'm sure you've heard of it. Things like that. Those are always, and it moves on to crisis stages. Stage 1, pre-crisis. That was interesting. But crisis leadership, that's got to be the hardest job for a public relations representative to deal with, is dealing with a crisis. Because I would never be a spin doctor if I worked in public relations. I would always have to be very ethical. And I just feel like when you have a disaster like this BP spill, how do you if you're a public relations person, I mean, the book kind of talks about, strategies and stuff, but how do you tell the public about that, other than why this company's going to do the right thing, blah, 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 when in fact they don't? Like, they end up just covering it up, which is what happened recently, where they just didn't bother cleaning it up anymore. They just, I don't know, whatever reason. I think that was the same spill, or it was another spill. No, I couldn't imagine how stressful that must be to represent a company like that. I'm being very articulate right now. It says a crisis is a major unpredictable event that threatens an organization. Common types of crises include economic, informational, physical, human resources, reputational, psychopathic acts. Oh, I didn't even notice that one. And natural disasters. It says you need to initiate action by convincing the organization that a crisis exists, by implementing the crisis management plan, and by mobilizing the crisis management team. In the midst of emergency, engage in vigilant decision-making. How do you do? I mean, I don't want to say how do you do that, but it just seems so complex to me. It says resist the temptation to reach decisions quickly and seek out new information instead. It's good advice. I mean, any other takes on that? I mean, I'm just perusing through some key areas in the chapters.
Yeah, I think from what I read, and I agree, I think that would be such a difficult job to do, because how do you tell the public, hey, we're going to take care of it, we're going to do the right thing, when, I mean, you just have to trust in the organization you work for that they actually are going to do that. That's why I think that prevention is probably the most important step. And I know the book mentioned that a lot of times after a crisis, or if there hasn't been a crisis for a long time, the company or whoever's in charge of this aspect of the company will get kind of overconfident or complacent and be like, oh, we don't have to worry about it. It's been so long. We're fine. And that's when the mistakes happen. So I think that by having crisis training, like continually, rather than just like after a crisis, like, oh, here's what we could do better next time. If they continually update their crisis management plan, and kind of talk to all the leaders in the company and get their input. That way, they're getting, some opinions that they might not have thought about, or they're getting some different methods that maybe weren't considered for how to deal with a crisis. I think also, yeah, just having training would help to at least, teach people what to do or what not to do, like how you're not supposed to talk to the press, or you're not supposed to make a statement unless you're, the PR person, or that's your specific job. That way there aren't multiple statements out there, and that way, the organization looks kind of cohesive as one unit, rather than everyone kind of adding their own little bit and then things not necessarily gelling with what everyone else is saying. And I think just kind of having a plan and action saying, okay, here, if this, if a crisis does happen, contact this person, or this person in the company will contact you, and they'll give you a rundown on what you're supposed to do or what you're not supposed to do. But I just think prevention is probably the most important step in just training for crisis management.
I agree. I think if they would have had most getting everything ready in meetings and keep it up, that and try to fix what's going on, because it looked like they haven't even cleaned half of the oil spill. I mean, like, this happened in 2010, right? Like around 2010, 2000. Oh, that year. Sorry, my son just came in. And they still have oil. How are they making us feel better? I mean, like, their communication is like not even telling the people. They just need to keep updating their crisis management, like you explained, Karen. I really think they need to do that. And from this chapter, sorry, I have an iPad. I should have never did that. They talk about how some organizations are in denial. I just think the BPPM people are in denial in their organization. Like, oh, we can fix it, but really they can't fix it. Do we call this a natural disaster, or is it what category do people suggest this crisis under? Because as I read and listened to all the video, the video lecture, they discussed saying that they had 10 waves of crisis, and natural disaster was one. Would this be considered under natural disaster? Because no, I don't think it would be under natural disaster, because natural disaster is mostly more like fire and hurricanes and stuff like that. So I really think that in the beginning they were in denial, because they were sending emails to everybody saying, hey, it's going to cost this much money to fix everything up. And they were invading responsibilities, as well as what happened and how this BP oil had ended up going everywhere in excuse me, in the ocean. So BP needed to take more responsibility into what happened, honestly, and for this to not happen again. Well, it haven't happened to my notice, because I just remember about this just now. Oh, excuse me. That's my input. I just think they invaded it, and they didn't take they were in denial in the beginning until everybody started getting on them, like, hey, what are we gonna do? So,
well, you got the whole Keystone Pipeline going on right now. I'm sure you guys have heard about the leak they had and how devastating it was. I mean, and considering how many people have protested that Keystone Pipeline, how many people have argued against it, but they still, carried on. They still created it, and now there's a leak. Just exactly what they said was going to happened. And these companies, there's going to be more leaks. Instead of focusing on sustainable energy, they're just going to they're wanting to create more problems so they can be rich and make money. And, you're always having to hear about them deny everything and not take responsibility or cover it up, because they need to keep doing it to keep making money, keep polluting, and so on. So it's disturbing to me that even if you have a great public relations team that can handle the crisis, it's just covering up the problem. It's not fixing it. And that's what's really scary and sad. I mean, even leaders right now, I'm not going to name any names because I don't know what your political beliefs are, but the leaders you hear on the news right now are doing the same thing. They're not taking responsibility for all the horrible things that they're doing. They're denying it. They're not reducing their offensiveness. They're being more offensive. And it's just, you're seeing this everywhere in corporations and political leadership, everything. It's just, and, I know this is about how to handle crisis, but it seems like, I don't know, it seems like all these great strategies, but it's like going through deaf ears to me, at least to me anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that, I think taking responsibility is definitely a huge part in getting the public back on your side. I think the book or the lecture used the Schwan's Food Company as an example, how their ice cream product was, or the product they used for ice cream was transferred in a truck that had previously had raw eggs in it. And so there was some foodborne illness and people got sick. And they said, yeah, no, this was our fault. It was, our bad. We're going to do what we can. And they paid the hospital bills of the people that got sick. And they ended up buying their own fleet of trucks in order to make sure that this wouldn't happen again. And Schwan's is a company from Minnesota, so I kind of have a lot of background, I guess, but not so much background with them, but like I know of them ever since growing up. And like they also mentioned how Schwan's, they give a lot back to the community. A lot of companies do that to kind of build up their public image before any crisis happens. That way the public already kind of has a good attitude towards them. And I think that's really important too, because I remember my brother played hockey at Schwan's Ice Arena. And it was this huge complex, and they did all these youth hockey tournaments there, and they had soccer fields there, and it was all sponsored and paid for by Schwan's, which I thought was great because giving back to the community, people already have this perception of, oh, they're a good company. So then when the crisis does happen, you're like, well, they're a good company. They're going to fix it. They're going to do something. And they did in their situation with the ice cream. So I think that taking responsibility is a huge, huge step.
I agree. There are some companies who can get by down, and their PR manager is fantastic. Just like Schwan's, as you mentioned, they did a great job after that happened. And I remember because I think I was in Chicago during that time when everybody started getting sick. So yeah, they was on it. I was like, wow. Like other corporations can't handle it, and I just think they need to go and emerge with those as that company that you mentioned and ask their peer how can they handle a crisis, because we had another one too that just like the Wells Fargo one. Remember how they had an insider, one of their officers, their own people who was working inside the building, inside the bank, went into people's accounts and started creating accounts and people names, and yeah, and they didn't handle it. They just was like, okay, we're gonna pay these people off their money, which was like $5 million. But they still trying to recover from that crisis, which I don't think. I'm a Wells Fargo. I can't lie. I'm a Wells Fargo. I'm a Wells Fargo customer, but I still have thoughts in my head, like, what happened is that gonna happen to me. What they did isn't enough. So like you said, I think taking responsibility, they took their responsibility, but it hit them hard that a lot of people left their company.
Awesome. I think we're good. We're at the end of our 15 minutes. So yeah.